Imagine a frozen morning in the Ardennes forest, December 19, 1944. German tank commanders stared into the thick fog, their breaths hanging in the icy air. Suddenly, a shadow emerged, a sleek American vehicle darting like a ghost. It fired once, crippling a mighty Panther tank, then vanished before anyone could react. Minutes later, the same Phantom struck from the opposite side. Radio messages flooded headquarters, enemy division overwhelming us. But the truth was far stranger. What if I told you this wasn't a massive force, but a clever handful of underdogs rewriting the rules of armored warfare? How could speed alone turn the tide against armored giants? Stick around, because this story of ingenuity and daring will reveal secrets of World War II that might just change how you see the battlefield forever. The German army had dominated Europe with their engineering marvels, the Tiger and Panther tanks, behemoths designed to crush anything in their path. These machines boasted sloped armor that deflected shells like rain off a roof, and guns that could punch through Allied steel from over a mile away. Yet in the chaos of the Battle of the Bulge, something was unraveling their invincibility. It wasn't brute force or superior numbers. It was a radical idea born from one man's vision, Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Davis Bruce. Back in 1941, as the world watched the Blitzkrieg sweep across continents, Bruce was tasked with heading the Tank Destroyer Tactical and Firing Center. He pored over reports of lopsided defeats where Allied tanks charged head-on and paid dearly. Conventional wisdom screamed for heavier armor and bigger cannons, but Bruce saw a different path. He realized German tanks, for all their power, had Achilles' heels, slow turret rotations and vulnerable sides. Why slug it out toe-to-toe when you could dance around the enemy? His doctrine: build light, fast vehicles that hit hard and vanish, speed as the ultimate weapon. The U.S. Army brass raised eyebrows, but they greenlit the project anyway. Enter the M18 Hellcat, a creation that defied expectations. Developed by Buick's innovative team, yes, the same minds behind post-war automotive icons like those finned Cadillacs, the Hellcat was engineered for agility over protection. Weighing a mere 18 tons compared to a Panther's 45 or a Tiger's 57, it shed weight by minimizing armor. The frontal hull was just 13 millimeters thick, enough to stop small arms fire, but little else. Crews nicknamed it a tin can on tracks, joking it kept out the weather more than the enemy. But that lightness unlocked incredible performance. Powering this beast was the Wright R975 radial engine, borrowed from aviation and tuned for ground combat. In a vehicle half the weight of its peers, it delivered blistering speeds, up to 55 miles per hour on roads, making the Hellcat the quickest tracked fighter of the era. Off-road, it still outpaced anything the Germans fielded. This wasn't just about straight-line sprints, it was tactical brilliance. At 30 miles per hour, the M18 covered 44 feet per second. Now, consider the Panther's turret. At idle speeds typical in combat, rotating 90 degrees took 15 to 20 seconds. In that window, a Hellcat could reposition over 600 feet away, far enough to flank and strike before the enemy could aim. German turrets relied on engine-driven hydraulics. The Tiger's system, at low RPM, dragged a full 360-degree turn to 4 agonizing minutes. Hand cranking in emergencies? That demanded 720 turns of a wheel, impractical under fire. These delays weren't quirks, they were exploitable weaknesses. Bruce's philosophy bet on crews outmaneuvering foes, turning defense into offense. It required nerves of steel, as the Hellcat's open-top turret left men exposed to the elements and overhead threats. No roof meant freezing winds, rain, or worse, shrapnel from distant explosions. Yet this design allowed quicker spotting and firing, emphasizing the hit-and-run ethos. By late 1944, the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with Hellcats, found itself in the Ardennes supporting the 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne.
The Battle of the Bulge was Hitler's desperate gamble, a massive counteroffensive with over 200,000 troops and hundreds of tanks aimed at splitting Allied lines. Fog blanketed the region, reducing visibility to mere yards. For the Germans, it was meant to conceal their advance. For the Americans, it became a cloak for cunning. Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Templeton led the 705th, attaching his Hellcats to Team de Sobry, a ragtag group under the 26-year-old Major William de Sobry, including Sherman's, infantry from the 506th Paratrooper Infantry Regiment, and paratroopers. Facing them, the elite 2nd Panzer Division, spearheading the assault toward the vital crossroads of Bastogne. On December 19th, near the village of Neuville, the clash erupted. German Panthers rumbled forward, expecting easy prey, but the Hellcats had other plans. Using the fog as an ally, a Hellcat would surge to a corner, spot a target through the mist, unleash a 76mm round into the side armor, where protection was thinnest, then reverse at full throttle. By the time the Panther's turret swung around, the attacker was blocks away, melting into the haze. Moments later, another strike from an unexpected angle. This shoot-and-scoot tactic sowed confusion. German spotters misjudged, reporting swarms of American armor. In reality, it was a small force multiplying its presence through mobility. The Hellcat's 76mm gun, while not the heaviest, packed enough punch at close range to penetrate German sides. Its high-velocity rounds ensured kills when aimed right. Crews endured bone-chilling cold in their open turrets, ears ringing from engines and gunfire, hearts pounding as they calculated split-second moves. One wrong turn, and thin armor offered no forgiveness. But success bred momentum. Over those 2 days, Team de Sobry and the 705th claimed over 30 German vehicles, delaying the Panzers and buying precious time for Bastogne's defenses. This wasn't blind luck, it was the culmination of Bruce's vision tested in fire. As the battle raged, the Hellcats proved that innovation could level the playing field against superior hardware. But the story doesn't end here. Deeper in the Ardennes and later in Italy, the Hellcat's legacy would unfold in even more astonishing ways, revealing how a fragile machine became a legend. What happened next pushed the limits of speed and strategy, turning retreat into routes and earning kill ratios that stunned historians.
The Germans never saw it coming. In the snow-choked streets of Neuville, every time a Panther or Panzer IV commander thought he had finally pinned down one of those elusive American tank destroyers, another shell would slam into his flank from a direction he hadn't even considered. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion wasn't just fighting, they were haunting the battlefield. Crews learned to use every scrap of cover, ruined barns, narrow alleys, patches of dense pine. They moved so fast that German forward observers couldn't keep up. One moment, a Hellcat was roaring past a shattered farmhouse. The next, it was gone, only to reappear half a kilometer away, already sighting down the barrel. Inside the open turrets, the reality was brutal. Freezing wind tore through the crew compartments. Men wore every layer they owned, yet frost still bit at exposed skin. The 76mm gun kicked like a mule every time it fired, and the sharp smell of cordite mixed with diesel exhaust never left their nostrils. But the fear of stopping outweighed the cold. Stopping meant becoming a stationary target. Stationary meant dead. Major William de Sobry, only 26, kept his mixed force together through sheer force of will. He understood the math better than most. A single well-placed German 75mm or 88mm round would turn a Hellcat into a burning coffin in less than a second. Yet, he also knew that if they held even a few more hours, the 101st Airborne could dig in deeper around Bastogne. Every destroyed Panther, every delayed column bought lives. So he pushed his men to take risks no textbook would ever recommend. On the afternoon of December 19th, one of the most legendary Hellcat actions of the entire campaign unfolded.
A section of 3 M18s under Lieutenant James "Red" McCown positioned themselves on the eastern edge of Noville. Through a brief thinning of the fog, they spotted a company of Panthers advancing in column along the main road. Instead of retreating, McCown gave the order that would later be repeated in training manuals: "We're going to parallel them." The 3 Hellcats accelerated to 30 miles an hour, racing alongside the German column at almost point-blank range, sometimes less than 200 yards. One after another, they fired into the thinner side armor, then kept moving. German turrets swung desperately, but the geometry was cruel. By the time a Panther's gun lined up, the Hellcat that had fired was already 400 yards farther down the line. The crews called it running the gauntlet. In less than 10 minutes, those 3 vehicles claimed 7 confirmed kills and forced the entire company to halt and redeploy. That single maneuver delayed the German advance by critical hours. But miracles have a price. Not every crew made it back. One Hellcat, commanded by Sergeant Thomas Riley, misjudged a turn in the fog. A Panther's gunner finally got lucky. The 75mm round punched straight through both sides of the hull. Riley and his loader never had a chance. The driver and gunner were thrown clear, badly burned, but alive. Stories like that spread quickly among the battalion. Everyone understood. Speed gave you a chance, not a guarantee. By the evening of December 20th, Team de Sobry was down to a handful of operational vehicles. Ammunition was dangerously low. Fuel was almost gone. Yet they had achieved the impossible. They had stalled the spearhead of the 2nd Panzer Division long enough for the 101st to solidify their defensive ring around Bastogne. When the order finally came to pull back, the surviving Hellcat crews did so grudgingly, knowing they had left dozens of smoking German hulks behind them. The legend of Noville would grow, but the Hellcat story was only beginning to unfold. 4 months later, and hundreds of miles south, the M18 would write an even wilder chapter, one that felt less like a desperate defense and more like a predator's hunt. By April 1945, the war in Italy had reached its final act. After months of brutal, slow fighting through the Gothic Line and the Apennine Mountains, the Allies finally broke into the broad, flat Po Valley. For German retreating forces, it was a nightmare landscape: open fields, straight roads, almost no defensible terrain. Columns of trucks, half-tracks, self-propelled guns, and tanks streamed north towards the Alps in a desperate attempt to escape encirclement. Into this chaos rolled the 805th Tank Destroyer Battalion, the only unit in the entire Mediterranean theater fully equipped with M18 Hellcats. Their commander, Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Fowler, had drilled his men relentlessly. They knew exactly what kind of country they were entering. Perfect Hellcat country. The crews had long ago painted small black cat emblems on their turrets, a cartoon feline sinking its teeth into a tank silhouette set against an orange disc. Higher command ordered the markings removed. The men quietly ignored the order. In fragile machines that offered almost no protection, that little black cat became a badge of defiance, a way of saying, "We know what we're driving, and we're still coming for you." What followed became known among the troops as the rat race. The 805th didn't wait for the Germans to come to them. They went hunting. Hellcats raced along secondary roads parallel to the main highways, sometimes only a few hundred yards away from the retreating columns. At 30 miles an hour, they would pull alongside, open fire with the 76mm guns, rake trucks and half-tracks, then surge ahead to hit the next vehicle before the Germans could react. It was drive-by warfare on industrial scale. German tank crews tried to swing their turrets, but the math remained merciless. 15 seconds to turn 90 degrees. In that time, a Hellcat could travel nearly 700 feet, far enough to vanish behind a rise, reappear on the opposite flank, or simply disappear into the dust cloud its own speed created. Prisoners became an afterthought. The Americans would disarm Germans surrendering, point them to the rear, and keep moving. There was no time to stop. The chase was relentless. Crews later described the surreal feeling, racing past stunned enemy infantry who simply lowered their rifles, too shocked to shoot, wind howling through open turrets, engines screaming, the smell of burning oil and cordite everywhere. One platoon of Hellcats covered nearly 60 miles in a single day, destroying or disabling dozens of vehicles without barely pausing to refuel. A black cat seen near Bologna in the morning would be reported 50 miles north by afternoon. German intelligence was baffled. They believed they were being pursued by multiple fast-moving battalions. In truth, it was one battalion, highly trained, highly motivated, and sitting in the fastest armored vehicles the war had ever seen. The numbers told an astonishing story. In the final weeks of the Italian campaign, the 805th claimed over 140 armored vehicles and hundreds of soft-skinned transports. Their kill ratio dwarfed almost every other American armored unit in the theater. The Hellcat wasn't just surviving anymore, it was dominating. Yet the men inside those machines never forgot how thin the margin was. A single 88mm shell, a well-aimed Panzerfaust, an airburst overhead, and the open turret turned into a death trap. They lived on adrenaline, black coffee, and the unspoken pact that they would never stop moving. By VE Day, the M18 Hellcat had quietly compiled the highest kill-to-loss ratio of any American tank or tank destroyer in the entire war. It hadn't won by being tougher or better armed. It had won by being somewhere else when the enemy finally aimed. But what does that really mean for the bigger picture of the war? And why did such a revolutionary design disappear so quickly after 1945? That's where the final part of this story takes us, into the lessons, the controversies, and the legacy that still echoes through modern armored warfare today.